The short answer is that that time is over with, and unfortunately, the circumstances that created an economy where you could live off of a single income no longer exist. Now, those times might be able to come back, but the important thing to understand is that the circumstances that created the United States economy from 1945 to 1973 were extremely exceptional, and they no longer exist today. For starters, America was unrivaled in industrial output following the end of the Second World War because it was one of the few industrial nations that wasn't completely bombed, such as Germany, Great Britain, as well as Japan. For that reason, we had very few competitors when it came to industrial production for several years. Another grim but true fact is that if you lose a large portion of your population, especially if they are working age, well, that increases demand for workers, which increases wages. And we lost a lot of people in the Second World War, therefore, wages were more competitive, and for that reason, workers were paid better. This is all happening on top of the fact that the United States went through a socialist movement in the 1920s and 30s that created things such as the New Deal, things such as workers' protections, and there was more unionization. For that reason, workers negotiated their wages more, which again made life better for the working and middle class. Another factor at play here was that people in power back then, in politics and in business, they understood the importance of investing in the American people. One, because they wanted to defeat communism in the Soviet Union. Therefore, they were going to make America the best country in the world so that the Soviet Union would not be more appealing, so that communism would not creep its way into the United States. Another thing was understanding that what gave rise to fascism in places like Italy and in Germany was, generally speaking, a disgruntled working and middle class. A great deal of fascists became more sympathetic to Nazis because they were frustrated by the failures of the Weimar Republic in Germany. So there was more incentive to basically subsidize the working and middle class in the United States because people back then understood that if they didn't do that, then people would rise up against them. Not only did corporations invest more in their own workers, but also in the American people by paying higher taxes, which provided greater social services, but more regulations were put in place to help limit the control of corporations in the 1930s and onward. Things such as limiting stock buybacks, or limiting the amount of money that you could donate to politicians, or lobbying. And fast forward to today, most of those regulations no longer exist or are no longer enforced. Today, it's not so easy. American industry has a lot more competition. Other countries have started to catch up to us, not just in industry, but also in education as well, providing high-value workers that Americans have to meet. When it comes to wages, American wages have largely not kept up with inflation because workers are less organized than they used to be. And usually, if you want to be effective at maintaining consistent wages, then you need to unionize. A great deal of subsidies and social services that existed in the past no longer exist for the working and middle class because the United States spent an exorbitant amount of money on foreign wars in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, and in order to pay for those, they've decided to abandon certain social services and defund certain things like education. So not only is the deficit going up because of these wars, but it's actually being made worse by the fact that taxes are being lowered, especially for the most wealthy. And for that reason, there's a greater deficit, which means that services that do remain in place are often working less effectively. Consumption's also up. We purchase a lot more than we used to, and the prices of these goods come from private companies, which means that the prices go up every single year or every single quarter. For that reason, we are spending more. So to answer your question, work is more competitive than it used to be. Laborers are less organized, therefore they are paid less than they used to be. Consumption is up, which is raising the cost of living. And social services and general subsidies that help maintain a healthy working class are no longer in existence. For that matter, when it comes to serving the interests of the people, the government, because of deregulation, is largely now in service to corporations and the upper class, not the middle and lower classes, which has made it more difficult to live a type of life where you can live off of one income in an entire household.